I think that the issues we're dealing with today, although they seem to be at their worst here in America in regards to men and women and how they relate to each other, the family life, our birth rates, overall our culture, and just who we are. Those issues, although they are somewhat new to our generation, and we're learning that these struggles they're greatly exacerbated in our generation compared to our parents, and even further back, right? It's not new. It's not entirely new. These issues actually are talked about in the Bible, and they started all the way back in Genesis. So I'm in Genesis 3 right now, and it's talking about Adam and Eve after they ate from the tree, right? And God is talking to them, and this is where we get the curses from, right? So right off the bat, we see in verse 12, um, the woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it. And then the Lord said to the woman, what is this you have done? The woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. So, in the very beginning, the first man and woman, we see that there's this evil entity, and it deceives Eve. And then we see man, where he fell short is he followed Eve into this sin, right? The woman was deceived, and man listened to woman and also ate. And now he has also sinned, right? You find in verse 17, when he's talking about the curse of man, he talks about the curse of the ground. It'll be tough to make your living, to harvest. The ground will produce thorns and thistles. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, right? This curse of work was good. Adam was already working, but now work is a curse. So these curses, he says in verse 17, before he lists them for man, to Adam he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat of it. And then he gives the curses. So he says, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you. The sin is, even in God's eyes, is partially due to him listening to his wife in this instance, right? And following in her sin, following in her deception. Satan didn't deceive Adam. The serpent purposely didn't go for Adam, I don't believe. He knew that his best chance was to go through Eve. And then, of course, Adam followed suit because of Eve, not because of the serpent. Evil is not tempting to man. I don't think men are necessarily tempted by evil. At least not in the garden they weren't, right? They were tempted by woman. They were tempted by staying in the good graces of Eve. And so they followed into her sin for whatever reason, because she was woman and she had that power over him. And I think we see that nowadays, right? I think a lot of us guys, we see the things wrong with society. We know how, in some sense, we know how to fix them, or at least we know what's right. And we know that things aren't the way they're supposed to be, right? But it's that woman, it's that feminine nature that keeps us from doing the right thing. It's almost like we're afraid of speaking truth because of what a woman might say or might do, or we see, hey, it'd be a lot better if our culture was structured like this. I don't think guys necessarily want women to vote in the first place, right? But we're just so afraid. We're like, it's like that Eve mentality. I'm going to take a bite of this apple. I'm going to do this. I'm going to support this. I'm going to say these thoughts that aren't my own thoughts. And it's because of Eve. It's because it's the original sin of man, right? That original problem. You listened to Eve and you didn't go by what was right, what was true, what you believed in your own heart. And you just bent to the culture and you did what they wanted you to do. You believed what they wanted you to believe, right? And I think we're just dealing with that again, right? We dealt with it in the garden, and we're dealing with it now. A lot of guys don't want to stick up. A lot of guys have these same thoughts, but they're afraid of the woman for some reason at this point. And in some sense, I think it's new to like a higher degree. I think there were these rules in place that, no wonder society had these separations, these divides in the genders where women were not in politics. They weren't outspoken. A lot of them, we see as oppressed, like they were, women have been oppressed forever. And some Christians say, and Jesus came to liberate them or whatever, which isn't true. I don't get that from the Bible, right? But this idea that women were put below men and they had certain expectations, right? You're not going to flaunt your body. We're going to have you wear this little cloth over your head, whatever. Some cultures take it to the extreme, but you're not going to speak, you're not going to make decisions, all this stuff. And we think it's really oppressive, but in reality, I think what they're guarding against is the original sin, right? The original sin that Eve dragged Adam into this sin because of who she was, because she's a woman and she was able to do that. She was able to have that power. The evil, the serpent wasn't able to tempt Adam, but Eve was deceived and she was able to drag him into it. So I think a lot of these supposed oppressive cultures, the reason they had those rules is because they knew the nature of man and woman, right? Here's another interesting verse 16. To the woman he said, and this is where he's talking about curses, I will greatly increase your pains in childbearing. With pain you will give birth to children. It's kind of funny too, right? They're part of the curse is pain in childbirth, right? When now you have a push for contraceptives, women are on birth control, and then the most heinous of them all, abortion. They're getting abortions. They're killing their kids, right? Because they have the freedom to do it, and that's what they're going to do with that freedom, right? Yet again, Planned Parenthood, was it Margaret Thatcher or something? I believe, like it was a woman that pushed for it, that started that movement in a sense. Yet again, it's woman being deceived and committing heinous crimes, heinous evil, abortion, and it's because we listened to Eve. We allowed them to do these things. But men are still going to be responsible, right, when you go before the judgment throne. So, but it's kind of interesting that the main curse is child rearing and in the pain in the childbirth. And through contraceptives and abortion, we're trying to mitigate that curse. We're trying to make it so you can have kids. And so if you do, you can get rid of your kid. You don't have to go through this pain of and inconvenience and whatnot, right? It's just, I don't know, it's crazy when you read through Genesis in light of what we live in now. But the next verse, your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. This is a huge verse. And a little bit of nicotine. So, what is he saying here? Your desire will be for your husband. Well, I did a little bit of research, and essentially the way he uses this verb or this word in the Greek, he also used it in other instances. And based on what we know and how this word is used, we know that basically what he's saying here is, like a more accurate translation would be, your desire will be to rule over your husband or to have his positions. Like your desire will be for your husband's position, kind of thing, right? You want to have power. You don't want to be controlled. You want that position your husband is in. And then it says, and he will rule over you. So this verse is showing that the initial curse, right, in some sense, I think it's bigger now than ever because we're allowing it. And we don't have those boundaries and those expectations for women and just boundaries for how the genders interact with each other. But it's also not new. It's a curse that we got from the beginning. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Your desire will be to have power and to not be controlled by your husband, and he will rule over you, I think is an accurate translation of that. And if you can do some research on your own and decide for yourself, but it took just a little bit of time for me to realize this was the general consensus. And that is what we're dealing with right now in culture. And we're losing to it, right? And in some cultures and in some times, we were able to combat it. But now, not only is it happening, but we're pushing for it. We're pushing for women having more power. We're pushing for them to have that control, right? And it's not like this was a curse, like, oh, and God said, I'm gonna make this happen. You're gonna have contention and whatever, and you're not gonna have the power that your husband has. No, he was just stating a fact. He's like, because of what you've done, because you've dragged him into this, because you've listened to her and caused sin, right? The natural result will be this contention. So it's not like this idea like, oh, if we, let women just start to have more control and be like men and stuff like that, things are going to get better. We're lifting the curse. It's like, no, well, first of all, you're not going to lift the curse, right? You're not going to lift the curse this side of heaven. So it's not even practical, so don't think you're doing it. And if you think you're doing it, Satan's doing something through that, right? Because that curse, we're stuck with it. But I think God was just saying, this is the result. Now, this is what you're going to be dealing with. This contention, the husband, the man is going to have the authority. Woman, she's not going to like that. And that's going to cause a lot of friction. And we're dealing with it, bro. We are dealing with it. And you just see it, right? Women are leaning more left. I think they're starting to realize this in the polls. Young women, they're starting to lean more liberal, more to the left side. Men, it says they're leaning more right. And I don't even know if that's true. I feel like guys are just, that's how they are naturally. If they got any amount of self-esteem, right? They're going to tend to be more conservative in their values and how they are. And women are just going in the opposite direction. This isn't a surprise. This isn't entirely new. I think it's worse now because now women are allowed to vote. Not only they're allowed to vote, they're allowed to have authority over man, which we know even in the New Testament is forbidden. They're allowed to teach. They're allowed to, assert the authority over the man. Even in the church and whatnot, there's no and we've talked about this before, right? This idea of because of the deception, Paul was saying in the New Testament, in Timothy, for women to be silent and not to, to be silent even in the church, right? Not to start authority and stuff like that. All of that's going away, right? And there's a push to put women in those positions, to have their opinions heard, to have their desires met. It's considered sexist and misogynistic and evil to even suggest, hey, we shouldn't be doing that. We shouldn't be trying to, make the world what women want. And I think I have good biblical reason to support that, right? It's this idea that, oh, my desires are equal to man's desires. And if you read the Bible, that's not the case. It's the exact opposite. But it's almost like Christians out here and people in the church aren't even reading the Bible. And I don't even mean to go down that route. I'm not bitter in that regard, right? But it's just so hard to ignore. If you're in the Word, if you're living life through experience and through being in the Word, you're going to realize things aren't the way they're supposed to be. And you're going to dive into the Word to try to find some answers. And you're going to find those answers. And then you're going to get frustrated that this isn't being talked about in the places it's supposed to be talked about, like the church, for instance. And then you start to see the evil in the world more, right? We wrestle not against flesh and blood. You start to see the spiritual evils in the world, in the church, and you see all of our decisions that seem good, that seem progressive, right? That seem progressive and modern and good, of leveling out the playing field, putting women on pedestals and stuff like that. We see that as progress. It's not progress at all. It's actually bad. It's the opposite. It's not what we want. And if you read Genesis, you know it's not what we want. And no matter what you do, we're still going to be dealing with this curse. So no matter, maybe we can't revoke the right for women to lead in politics, to lead in the church, to teach, to have authority, to vote, etc. And so maybe that stuff, it keeps going down that route. Maybe we keep becoming more progressive. But no matter how progressive you are, there's still going to be this tension between man and woman. And I would argue that those boundaries we had in the past were originally meant to help to recognize this tension, to recognize the ability to be deceived easily, and for men to fall into that deception like the original sin. So we set up these boundaries for the men and women, you know, and for what men are able to do and how women are able to do all those same things, right? And it worked, and it was good, largely. By breaking those down, I think it's going to make it even worse, right? And that's exactly what we're doing. And we think we're eliminating this curse. No, we're making it worse. But yeah, it's just kind of funny. It's like not a new thing. Women from the beginning, from Eve, their original sin was trying to be dependent. Trying to be independent, sorry. Trying to be independent, trying to make decisions. And of course it'd work if they weren't easily deceived, but they are. And the problem with men was, the word is simping, being a cuck, simping for women, neglecting your duty as a man to lead and to make good, righteous decisions based on what you know in your heart and what you know through wisdom. Good decisions that are for the benefit of everyone, for the benefit of women, for the benefit of men, for the benefit of society, for the benefit of children, for the benefit of the family, for the benefit of the culture, right? We've forsaken that duty as men by handing it over to the women, or at least dividing it among the men and women and acting like, there is no differentiation between the two sexes. And this happens in the culture, this happens. It's already happened, it's done, it's happened, right? And now what we're seeing, and it's happened in the church just as equally, and they just don't want to talk about it. And now what we're dealing with is, or what we're seeing is, we're these problems that are coming out that before they weren't as big because we recognized this tension, the desire for the woman to have her husband's place and not to want to submit, right? And the man to, fall prey to taking a bite of the apple because you've said so, right? Now that these boundaries are coming down, we're experiencing these problems in real time, and it's snowballing, right? Faster than it ever has before. So the problem isn't new. It's been here since Genesis. But what is new is these boundaries, and boundaries are good for a reason, right? Fences are there for a reason. And we're just tearing them all down without a question. We're ignoring the scripture. And now we're going to deal with this cascade of consequences because of that. And we already are dealing with that cascade. And it results in a whole lot of things. It results in the perversion of our youth, the perversion of our society to sexual degeneracy, to transgenderism, to homosexuality, being more flippant and out there, to the family breaking down, right? Birth rates dropping, people not getting in relationships, healthy, good relationships, even in politics, struggle to make any progress because we're dealing with this, because now we're contending with not our own wisdom and judgment, but now we have to sway the other half of society with emotional arguments and things that make sense to them as women. And we're just dealing with all this right now. And my hope is that now that it's getting bad, people will try to find the root of it and what's causing it, and they'll come to this conclusion. My hope is what kind of I've always hoped, is that we're in the Word, that we're looking through Scripture, that we're doing it in love, we're searching for wisdom, and that we find it in God's Word. And that's my hope. And I just hope that's the result, right? We deal with these issues, and we try to find a way to solve them, and we come to the conclusion that we shouldn't have taken those boundaries down, that we shouldn't have just let these things happen like they're happening in the church and society. I don't know if people are going to conclude that, right? I don't know if, they're going to come up with some other reason, some other solution that's not going to work. And that's not to say that all of our problems are due to, the feminist movement and the church bending over to socialism and feminist ideology and attacking the young men. But it is to say that that is a huge problem. And I would say that's where a lot of our issues come from. And a lot would be solved if we figure that out. I don't know if we are, you know. Are our leaders in the Word? Are they enlightened? Do they know the story of Genesis? Probably not. Our spiritual leaders, they have no excuse, right? They're older than us. Some of them went to seminary, right? All that jazz. They should know this better than anyone. But what I've experienced and what my buddies have experienced, my other church-going buddies, is that they don't. That they're not in the Word. Or they are, but they're ignoring the truths. For fear, maybe. For fear of being outspoken about it. Or they're so brainwashed they excuse it in some way. It's a cultural thing. It's like, no, it's not a cultural thing. It's a story of the beginning of time, right? Whether you believe the story of Genesis is literal or it's some type of allegory or something like that, right? A story that's shedding light on human nature. Whatever you believe, I tend to take a literal approach, but regardless, there's truth in it, right? There's wisdom in it. And it explains a lot of things. It explains a lot of what we're dealing with as guys. And, in addition, what a lot of you women are experiencing too, right? Though you may not realize it, is because of this. Because of, and I hate to use words like liberalization or progressive, because that makes it sound like it's strictly political, which it's not, because those are terms usually used in politics. But it's essentially the story of Adam and Eve and the fact we're ignoring it. And now we're dealing with the repercussions, right? And I think you can trace a lot of stuff back to it, right? A lot of tension in the household, a lot of, the divorce rate being so high. Half of marriages end in divorce, and like almost 80% is initiated by women. And that's not to say that the men are perfect, right? But that is to say that's an offshoot, that's a result of Genesis, the tension that God said you guys are going to be experiencing, right? And the tearing down of the rules and the boundaries and the standards that we held before, that we no longer have as this egalitarian society where men and women are the same and we can just ignore all this stuff. I mean, it's just going to be a straight up avalanche. An avalanche of problems, man. And we're dealing with it right now. You like my little SpongeBob? We had a birthday. So we got a couple balloons. Little SpongeBob balloon. But anyhow, just, if you're in the Word, stuff starts to make more sense. But then there's that next level of, are you going to be brave about it? Are you going to talk about it with your friends, on your platforms, right? And I understand that's tough, but I think something that you can, that can help is trying to ignore a little bit of, maybe ignoring the older generations, which have already kind of let us down. And a lot of those people give you flack. That's the funny thing. I've shared these thoughts from people the ages of 15, 16, teenagers to openly, right? Ideas like, oh, women shouldn't vote, right? It's a very simple statement, and there's not, but it's a very controversial one, right? But I've shared that thought with young people in groups and big groups and all different ages, right? That's just one example. I've had people say, hey, Clark, what's your most controversial opinion? and they knew they were going to get a good answer. So I've done that before, and just talks and whatnot. And the funny thing is, it's the older people that give you the most flack. Like the younger, I mean, definitely like younger women, they won't understand it. But when they hear you talk about it in a smart, intelligent way, although, it's not like they're going to do anything about it, right? It's not like they're going to be more traditional in their thinking. Their minds have become so corrupt, a lot of them. But they're going to see a man who knows what he's about, man with a good reputation. That's important, right? And they're going to see him talk about this. They're going to think, okay, well, maybe there's some wisdom in this, right? It's not just some dude spouting off, right? But it's a lot of the older people, man. I don't know how it is. I used to think that it was the older generations, my grandparents, my parents, that were the more conservative type, the more traditional. But I'm realizing that's not the case at all, actually. For some reason, they tend to be the most ignorant of it. And they tend to push back the most. Not just like from the left, but from the right, too. It's crazy. So yeah, if you can learn to ignore them a little bit, right? And at the same time, maybe ignore your more young liberal voices, like whether it's girls that get all pissed off about it or whatever, or your soy boys. If you can learn to ignore them a little bit and get around guys that are in the Word, that are not even political, just common sense guys, right? And the big thing is being in the Word, that they're actually reading the Bible. And they're intellectual. They're thinking about these things. They're aware of current events. You'll find that they are very open to this idea. If not, they might have already arrived at that conclusion themselves and they just don't talk about it. But if you talk about it with them more, you realize, wow, I've got a lot more support than I thought. A lot of guys are seeing these issues. A lot of guys come to similar conclusions, even if they can't articulate it and point it back to Genesis, right? They just come to this realization that's like, wow, this isn't great. Women being in politics, women being fed social media. They're realizing that, their sisters and their girlfriends are being, their minds are being twisted a little bit, and it's causing behavior issues and etc. Right? So, and even if you just like talk to guys and ask them what they want, it's like they don't want a girl that's, highly educated and focused on money. They want to start a family, man. They want a girl that's focused on starting a family. She's more traditional. She's not super assertive, right? All this stuff. Like if you even just get down to that, you'll get an honest answer. That a lot of guys are looking for that. But yeah, if you get around more guys like that and just start talking, younger guys our ages, you can find that support system and you can talk and bounce ideas off of each other and whatnot, and just not pay so much attention to the older generations that, for whatever reason, have been so easily deceived. And if they haven't been deceived, they've just kind of not been outspoken or done anything about it. To our detriment, by the way. To our detriment. Because we're the ones dealing with, the crisis of the family, the crisis of the birth rates, the crisis of the relationships, and then all the additional things that come with that, right? Come with, it's to our detriment, not theirs. They're kind of, a lot of them are already set, right? But, yeah, just ignoring those other voices, sticking to what you believe, staying in the Word, and being around other guys that you can talk about this stuff freely with, that's going to help a lot. And then just being outspoken about it, man, that's the biggest thing right now, I think. Maybe you don't have a platform, right? Maybe you don't go to church. Maybe you don't have a big friend group. But when there's an opportunity to talk about it in a good, intellectual, conversational way, not just spouting off nonsense, right? Just be honest, and do it in a humble way, right? A good humble way would be, I've just been looking into it and I don't know if things are so great the way we're doing it. And I'm wondering if it has to do with this feminist movement, with this, or like problems in the church. Maybe they're not preaching the whole gospel. Maybe they're not supporting men like they should be, right? Stuff that's pretty hard to ignore. You can just do it in a humble way and say, I may be wrong about this, but this is why I think this is so. And that's what I try to do now. I try not to be a know-it-all, right? Because my my views, they're not going to change a lot in terms of, like, I've come to it not through being influenced, but through experience and through logic, right? But different things I might learn a little bit more, and there might be small alterations in my opinion. Not the core of them, right? But you just have to be open and willing to listen, and to grow, and to formulate your opinions, right? So do it in a humble way, but just be outspoken about whatever's going on in a humble way, but be outspoken about it. And then, just like I say always, just be in the Word, right? Read the Word, take it for what it is. Don't try to twist it. And that's going to give you a lot of wisdom. It's going to explain a lot of things. It won't really solve everything, right? It's not going to. This is a big problem we're dealing with. But, just being around other young guys and being truthful about your opinion, that's really important, man. And, if you've grown up in America today, you've kind of grown. You've had culture and everyone telling you that as a man, you don't need to voice your opinion as a man. You need to just kind of shut up a little bit. You need to think this and that, right? It's misogynistic to have any opinion on women and how they should act, right? All these things, you got to deprogram yourself, right? And that's what I'm doing. You have to deprogram yourself. Man, you were created first, right? Women were made to be your helper. They're going to be happy when they're in that position, right? Even though they may not know it. But you have a mission, and you're created in the image of God. And it's important to take hold of that role and to know who you are, even when society is trying to make you forget about who you are. You need to remember who you are when you're talking about these things, right? You're wise, you're intelligent, you're made in the image of God. So what you think and the opinions you have matter. Your problems, they matter. They matter a lot. If people think you're just complaining and, you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, stop whining, stop being a negative Nancy, don't listen to those people, man, because we live in an evil world with a lot of problems. And there's a lot of corruption going on, and there's a lot of evil, anti-biblical influence on social media. It's from the devil, I'm telling you, and from all these voices. So just know you're made in the image of God, right? And your opinion matters. Your problems, they matter. As young guys, they matter. Okay? And then just stay in the Word, man. Just stay in the Word.